Grand Admiral Thizara of the Valkyrie Imperium manipulated the holographic display with growing disbelief, her crystalline fingers sending ripples of light through the data streams. The Explorer probe's findings defied conventional understanding. "Play the atmospheric composition analysis again," she ordered, her voice like wind chimes in the command chamber's perfect acoustics. The subordinate officer, a third-tier knowledge keeper, complied with the gesture. "The readings remain consistent, Grand Admiral. Nitrogen-oxygen mix with carbon dioxide levels that would be toxic to any civilized species. Solar radiation exposure exceeding safe thresholds by 312%. Gravity at 2.7 times Valkyrie standard." Thizara's faceted eyes narrowed. "And you're certain the signals originate from this hellscape?" "Indisputably." The knowledge keeper projected a new image. Radio waves and electromagnetic patterns, unmistakably artificial. "Not just communication, Grand Admiral. Music, art forms, mathematical sequences beyond random occurrence." The implications were troubling. The Valkyrie Imperium had catalogued over 6,000 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their taxonomic system was flawless. Garden worlds for colonization, resource worlds for extraction, and death worlds to be studied remotely or avoided entirely. This planet, designated EC3, third from an unremarkable yellow star, should have been classified as uninhabitable, yet the signals suggested otherwise. "Dispatch stealth observers," Thizara ordered after a moment's contemplation. "Full biological and sociological profile." 3 lunar cycles later, the High Council of the Valkyrie Imperium convened an emergency session for the first time in 800 years. The chamber, a perfect dodecahedron of living crystal, hummed with tension as the 12 most powerful beings in known space reviewed the observer footage. On the central projection, a human child splashed through water under direct sunlight, laughing. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Jixel, her crystalline form pulsing with distress patterns. "The ultraviolet exposure alone should cause immediate cellular degradation." Sub-Chancellor Mesrel, ambitious leader of the Expansion Directive, gestured dismissively. "Yet they not only survive but appear to enjoy these conditions." His voice hardened with sudden opportunity. "The military applications are obvious." The footage shifted to human adults performing physical labor. Construction workers lifting steel beams, miners operating heavy machinery in crushing underground environments, athletes pushing their bodies to extremes of endurance. "They're natural laborers," Mesrel continued, excitement making his form shimmer. "Imagine them mining heavy gravity worlds we cannot safely exploit, terraforming toxic atmospheres. Their biological hardiness makes them perfect servants for the more challenging environments within our domain." Only Xalthir, eldest of the council and keeper of the ancient sciences, remained silent, his ancient form nearly transparent with age. When he finally spoke, his voice barely carried across the chamber. "We may be making a grave miscalculation." The council turned to him with the deference his 30,000 cycles of existence commanded. "These beings have achieved spaceflight despite constant warfare. They've split atoms while still burning hydrocarbons. Their adaptation rate exceeds anything in our evolutionary database." His ancient eyes focused on a frozen image of humans working cooperatively to rescue others from a collapsed building. Their cognitive patterns suggest a dangerous combination of traits, creative problem-solving with pack-bonding behaviors. "We should study them thoroughly before making contact." Mesrel's laughter tinkled like breaking glass. "Study primitive biologics who still kill each other over resource distribution. What could we possibly learn from creatures barely into their electronic age?" The debate might have continued for cycles more, but fate intervened. A knowledge keeper entered the chamber, a breach of protocol so severe that silence fell immediately. "Forgive the intrusion, exalted ones," she said, her form pulsing with urgency patterns. "The humans have detected our observation vessels. Their primitive orbital instruments registered our stealth field harmonics during a satellite deployment." Sovereign Matriarch Zilithi, who had remained silent throughout the debate, rose to her full height, towering over the council. Her multifaceted eyes swept the chamber, ending the discussion with a single pronouncement. "Prepare the emissary vessel. If we cannot observe undetected, we shall present ourselves in a manner befitting our status. These humans will be given the honor of serving the oldest civilization in known space." As the council dispersed to execute her will, only Xalthir remained, studying the frozen image of humans working together to overcome disaster. "I fear," he whispered to the empty chamber, "that we may soon learn precisely how strong they truly are." The United Nations Security Council chamber fell into stunned silence as Ambassador Mesril glided through the doors. Her semi-transparent body emanated a soft blue luminescence that cast eerie shadows across the room. Behind her, 6 Valkyrie diplomats followed in environmental suits so complex they resembled crystalline exoskeletons rather than protective gear. "Greetings, representatives of Earth." Mesril's voice resonated with musical undertones that made several delegates press their hands to their ears. A Valkyrie technician noticed the reaction and adjusted a device on her collar. "Forgive the auditory discomfort. Your atmospheric density carries sound waves differently than our homeworld." Secretary General Okafor rose from his seat. "On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to Earth and to the United Nations." Mesril's faceted eyes swept the room with poorly concealed disdain. "Your hospitality is acceptable, considering your developmental stage." The diplomatic corps had prepared for first contact scenarios for decades, but nothing had prepared them for the sheer arrogance of the Valkyrie. As Mesril activated a holographic display showing the vast expanse of their empire, Dr. Maya Chen, Earth's chief xenobiologist, noticed something alarming. The Valkyrie delegates were physically declining the longer they remained. Their crystalline forms, initially brilliant and geometrically perfect, had begun to develop tiny fractures along their edges. "Ambassador," Chen interrupted as Mesril described the 50,000 cycles of Valkyrie enlightenment. "Your delegation appears to be experiencing physical distress. May we offer medical assistance?" Mesril's laughter sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Your concern is noted. Primitive, but our discomfort is temporary. We've studied your unique physiology. Quite fascinating how you've adapted to survive here, rather than properly terraforming to habitable conditions." The diplomatic meeting grew increasingly strained as the Valkyrie demanded what they called a demonstration of human capabilities. They observed military training exercises at Fort Bragg, where soldiers ran endurance courses in full gear under the summer sun. They attended Olympic qualifying events, measuring and scanning the athletes with devices that pulsed with strange energy. They toured disaster relief operations after a hurricane struck Florida, watching rescue workers pull survivors from flooding waters. Each demonstration was met with the same response: whispered conversations among the Valkyrie, data collection, and patronizing commendations on humanity's remarkable biological adaptations to adverse conditions. At a reception in the Valkyrie delegation's honor, Ambassador Johansson of Norway approached Dr. Chen with a worried expression. "They've been cataloging us," he murmured, watching the aliens circulate through the crowd. "Did you notice how they ask different questions to different professions? Mining engineers about deep Earth operations, military personnel about survival training, healthcare workers about trauma recovery." Chen nodded grimly. "They're assessing our usefulness." The misinterpretation became mutual during the reception. When human diplomats consumed alcohol in a traditional toast, the Valkyrie observers registered acute alarm. "They require chemical stimulation for basic social functions," one whispered to Mesril. "Possible sign of evolutionary deficiency in neurological development." Children playing soccer on the embassy grounds were interpreted as brutal endurance training for juvenile specimens, while a heated debate between 2 diplomats over climate policy was logged as potential precursor to tribal warfare. As the Valkyrie delegation prepared to depart after a week of observations, Secretary General Okafor attempted one last diplomatic overture. We hope this is the beginning of peaceful cooperation between our worlds." Mesrel's expression would have been pitying if her crystalline features could form such an emotion. "Indeed, your species has demonstrated remarkable survivability." She gestured to her aides, who presented a small crystal cue, a token of Valkyrie benevolence, simplified medical technology suitable for your current development stage. Dr. Chen examined the device later and discovered it was equivalent to 22nd century nanotechnology by human standards. The Valkyrie departed with data crystals full of information and a fundamental error in their assessment. They believed humans were desperate survivors of multiple extinction-level events rather than the shapers of their world. Mesrel's report to the High Council recommended immediate integration, before humans destroyed themselves through what she termed evolutionary desperation. What the report failed to mention was her private ambition, to be remembered as the architect of humanity's incorporation into the Empire, the greatest labor force the Valkyrie had ever discovered, the highest honor bestowed upon newly discovered species. Dr. Maya Chen read the holographic message aloud to the assembled world leaders in the UN's secure conference room. 6 months had passed since the Valkyrie delegation departed Earth. Now their communication, delivered via a crystalline data sphere that hovered in the center of the table, extended a formal invitation to Valkyris Prime for what they called cultural exchange and integration. Integration. General Williams of the United States Joint Chiefs snorted. "A pretty word for annexation." "Perhaps," replied Premier Zhao of the Chinese delegation, "but also an unprecedented opportunity. Their technology is centuries beyond ours." Behind closed doors, Earth's leaders debated for 3 days. Intelligence agencies presented risk assessments. Xenobiologists detailed physiological vulnerabilities, both human and Valkyrie. Game theorists mapped decision trees for every conceivable scenario. In the end, they reached consensus. Humanity would accept the invitation, but with a uniquely prepared delegation. "I still think this is insane," Dr. Maya Chen muttered, adjusting her sister's neural implant. Commander Sarah Chen, decorated Special Forces operative, and now the delegation's cultural attaché, sat patiently as the microscopic sensors were calibrated. "Better insane than unprepared," Sarah replied. "If they're cataloging us for servitude, we need to know." 20 delegates have been selected, not just for expertise but for adaptability under pressure. Dr. Kwame Osai, the quantum physicist with deep-sea engineering experience. Ambassador George Mendez, veteran of a dozen high-stakes negotiations. Dr. Leila Patel, cultural anthropologist who'd lived with 26 different indigenous tribes. Each delegate underwent enhancement: subcutaneous environmental sensors, specialized contact lenses with recording capabilities, and neural implants for encrypted communication. "You'll be able to share sensory data without speaking," Maya explained, completing the calibration. "Just subvocalize the recipient's name." Sarah nodded, her expression somber. "And if we don't come back?" Maya's hand stilled. "Then Earth prepares for the worst." The human delegation's arrival on Valkyris Prime became an instant spectacle. Their transport vessel, a crystalline structure that seemed to fold space rather than traverse it, docked at a spire so tall its summit disappeared into the pink atmosphere. Gravity at approximately 0.4 Earth standard. Dr. Osei subvocalized to the team as they disembarked. "Atmospheric pressure 0.7 of our norm. Oxygen content elevated. Everyone remember your breathing exercises to avoid euphoria." The Valkyrie homeworld defied natural law. Impossibly thin structures of living crystal reached kilometers into the sky. Floating platforms carried Valkyrie citizens between structures, their translucent bodies shimmering with inner light as they stared at the humans with unconcealed curiosity. The delegation was housed in a palace where every surface responded to thought. Servant species from across the galaxy attended to their needs: reptilian kreks, insectoid vril, and a dozen other forms the humans had never seen. "Notice," Commander Chen subvocalized that evening as they gathered in their common room, We're being shown wonders but not substance. This is a zoo tour, not a cultural exchange. Ambassador Mendez nodded slightly. And our quarters, while ostensibly luxurious, are arranged for optimal observation. The walls contain scanning technology. Meanwhile, in the restricted chambers of the High Council, Sub-Chancellor Mesril presented holographic displays of the human delegates. These specimens represent the apex of their species, she explained. Study their physiological parameters. Even in our gravity, which we expected to debilitate them, they move with only minimal compensation. Their hyperoxygenated blood should cause neurological impairment, yet their cognitive functions remain intact. She displayed footage of humans performing rescue operations during an earthquake, lifting several times their body weight. Imagine them mining heavy gravity worlds, terraforming toxic atmospheres, serving as frontline forces against the air threat. Arrogance is truly misplaced. The ancient scientist Salther, nearly translucent with age, raised a crystalline hand. We are making a dangerous assumption. These beings built global communication networks despite constant warfare. They split atoms while still using combustion engines. Their adaptation rate exceeds anything in our biological database. Are you suggesting, Mesril's voice rang with derision, that these creatures might be our equals? The council chamber erupted in crystalline laughter, all except for the sovereign matriarch, whose many-faceted eyes narrowed thoughtfully at the human behavioral data. Schedule the integration ceremony, she commanded after the laughter subsided. It is time to formalize humanity's place within our empire. As the council dispersed, only Xalthir remained, his ancient eyes fixed on the holographic display of the human delegation. In the privacy of the empty chamber, he whispered a warning none would hear. We may soon discover woes the grand convocation chamber pulsed with light as thousands of Valkyrie elites gathered for the integration ceremony. Constructed millennia ago from living crystal and exotic matter, the ancient structure was considered the pinnacle of Valkyrie architectural achievement, a perfect manifestation of their belief in harmonious order. The human delegation stood on a floating platform before the sovereign matriarch, uncomfortably aware they were being presented as the newest client species rather than equal partners. Commander Chen's enhanced vision scanned the chamber through her specialized contacts, the implant behind her ear feeding her structural analyses. Structural anomalies detected in northwest support column, the system reported in her mind's eye. Microscopic fracture patterns inconsistent with normal crystalline stress distribution. She quietly leaned toward Ambassador Mendez. The northwest support column has unusual fracture patterns, possible structural weakness. Their Valkyrie handler, a mid-tier administrator named Thelios, overheard and gestured dismissively with a crystalline limb. These structures have stood for thousands of cycles, sustained by technologies your kind cannot comprehend. Your concerns, while noted, reflect a limited understanding of our engineering principles. Sub-Chancellor Mesril had begun the ceremony, her voice resonating through the chamber as she extolled the generous protection the Valkyrie would provide humanity. Today marks your species' ascension from primitive isolation to membership in the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. Though you are young and undeveloped, we recognize your potential as valuable contributors to. A violent tremor interrupted her speech, rippling through the chamber. Crystal fragments showered from the ceiling as the delegates gasped collectively. The humans instinctively crouched in defensive postures while the Valkyrie stood frozen, their faceted eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible, Mesril whispered, her form pulsing with distress patterns. Our technology cannot fail. A second, stronger tremor shook the chamber. The northwest support column, the one Commander Chen had identified, emitted a high-pitched sound like breaking glass, magnified 1,000-fold. A catastrophic resonance cascade began propagating through the living crystal structure. Massive shards, each weighing hundreds of kilograms, detached from the ceiling and plummeted toward the assembled dignitaries. The Valkyrie, paralyzed by the psychological shock of their perfect technology failing, stood immobile as death descended. Move. Everyone move. Commander Chen's voice cut through the chaos. The human delegation exploded into action. Dr. Osei's quantum physics and deep-sea engineering experience let him instantly analyze the collapsing support structures. "Brace the central arch," he shouted, pointing to key structural points. "Create support triangles with debris." Commander Chen calculated trajectories in the low gravity, leaping 20 feet upward to intercept a crystal shard that would have impaled the sovereign matriarch. The impact broke 3 of Chen's ribs, sending pain signals that her implant suppressed as she landed, and immediately pivoted to protect a group of young Valkyrie from another falling fragment. Ambassador Mendez organized Valkyrie survivors into evacuation groups. Dr. Patel, the cultural anthropologist, adapted human triage protocols for alien physiology, identifying which crystalline fracture patterns indicated critical injuries in Valkyrie bodies. For 6 relentless hours, the humans worked beyond exhaustion in conditions that grew increasingly hostile. The chamber's environmental systems failed, releasing gases harmless to humans but lethal to Valkyrie. Without hesitation, the delegation shared their emergency breathing apparatus with wounded aliens, exposing themselves to the painful high-oxygen environment. The most shocking moment came when Dr. Layla Patel, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, carried 4 injured Valkyrie children to safety, each weighing as much as she did despite the lower gravity, through a corridor where Earth oxygen had ignited a chemical reaction with Valkyrie construction materials, creating walls of blue flame. When she emerged, burned but determined, a hush fell over the survivors. An injured Valkyrie counselor asked the question that would reverberate through their society. "Why? We are not your kind." Patel's simple answer came between labored breaths. "Because you needed help." The Valkyrie communications network, still operational despite the disaster, transmitted her words across the planet within minutes. For the first time in recorded history, the arrogant certainty of Valkyrie's superiority began to crack, much like their perfect crystal chamber. In a secure medical facility beneath the Valkyrie capital, Sub-Chancellor Mesril stared at the holographic displays with mounting horror. The neural mapping data from humans during the crisis couldn't be accurate. She gestured sharply, crystalline fingers sending ripples through the display. "This cannot be correct. Reanalyze." The medical technician, a specialist in xenobiology, adjusted parameters and ran the analysis again. The results remained unchanged. "The data is consistent, Sub-Chancellor. Human neural processing during crisis situations shows cognitive pathways we've never observed in any species." The technician highlighted specific patterns. These decision trees form and execute simultaneously rather than sequentially. They're processing multiple complex problems in parallel. Mesril's form pulsed with distress patterns, and the physical samples, equally concerning. The technician displayed cellular imaging from blood samples taken from injured humans. Their regenerative capabilities exceed our medical models. This Commander Chen sustained 3 fracture injuries, yet continued functioning at peak capacity for 6 hours. Their pain suppression abilities alone would be remarkable, but combined with their accelerated tissue repair. "Impossible," Mesril whispered, but the evidence contradicted her certainty. More disturbing still were the recordings from the humans' conversations during the crisis, captured by Valkyrie surveillance, but untranslated until now. The humans had identified structural weaknesses in the chamber within minutes of arrival, weaknesses Valkyrie engineers had missed for centuries. Across the city, in a private healing chamber, the sovereign matriarch contemplated similar data. Beside her recovery pod stood Salther, the ancient scientist whose warnings had been ignored. "You were correct," she admitted, her voice weaker than usual. "We have gravely misunderstood these beings." Salther's nearly transparent form seemed to absorb and refract the room's light. The failing monument was not an accident, he revealed quietly. Our consensus intelligence detected subtle sabotage patterns, likely from the Nair Collective, but identified them too late to prevent the attack. The matriarch's faceted eyes widened. You kept this from the council. The information was too sensitive while we assessed the humans. Now it places us in a complicated position. Zalthar gestured, bringing up comparison data between Valkyrie and human neural patterns. Our evolutionary path optimized for efficiency and stable environments, while humans evolved for adaptation to chaos and crisis. The implications were profound. The Valkyrie's perfect crystalline neural pathways processed information with unmatched efficiency. When parameters remained stable, human, inefficient neural networks, with their seemingly chaotic connections, created mental flexibility that allowed for instant adaptation to changing conditions. Our society functions on absolute certainty of our evolutionary superiority, the matriarch observed. This belief has maintained peace for millennia. A peace now threatened by truth, Zalthar replied. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Maya Chen analyzed the medical data transmitted by her sister's implants. The Valkyrie physiology was becoming clearer. Their crystalline structures allowed perfect energy transmission and thought patterns of remarkable clarity, but lacked the neural plasticity of human brains. For 6 relentless hours, the humans worked beyond exhaustion in conditions that grew increasingly hostile. The chamber's environmental systems failed, releasing gases harmless to humans but lethal to Valkyrie. Without hesitation, the delegation shared their emergency breathing apparatus with wounded aliens, exposing themselves to the painful high-oxygen environment. The most shocking moment came when Dr. Layla Patel, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, carried 4 injured Valkyrie children to safety, each weighing as much as she did despite the lower gravity. Through a corridor where Earth oxygen had ignited a chemical reaction with Valkyrie construction materials, creating walls of blue flame. When she emerged, burned but determined, a hush fell over the survivors. An injured Valkyrie counselor asked the question that would reverberate through their society. Why? We are not your kind. Patel's simple answer came between labored breaths. Because you needed help. The Valkyrie Communications Network, still operational despite the disaster, transmitted her words across the planet within minutes. For the first time in recorded history, the arrogant certainty of Valkyrie's superiority began to crack, much like their perfect crystal chamber. In a secure medical facility beneath the Valkyrie capital, Sub-Chancellor Mesril stared at the holographic displays with mounting horror. The neural mapping data from humans during the crisis couldn't be accurate. She gestured sharply, crystalline fingers sending ripples through the display. This cannot be correct. Reanalyze. The medical technician, a specialist in xenobiology, adjusted parameters and ran the analysis again. The results remained unchanged. The data is consistent, Sub-Chancellor. Human neural processing during crisis situations shows cognitive pathways we've never observed in any species. The technician highlighted specific patterns. These decision trees form and execute simultaneously rather than sequentially. They're processing multiple complex problems in parallel. Mesril's form pulsed with distress patterns, and the physical samples. Equally concerning. The technician displayed cellular imaging from blood samples taken from injured humans. Their regenerative capabilities exceed our medical models. This Commander Chen sustained 3 fracture injuries, yet continued functioning at peak capacity for 6 hours. Their pain suppression abilities alone would be remarkable, but combined with their accelerated tissue repair. Impossible, Mesril whispered, but the evidence contradicted her certainty. More disturbing still were the recordings from the humans' conversations during the crisis, captured by Valkyrie surveillance, but untranslated until now. The humans had identified structural weaknesses in the chamber within minutes of arrival, weaknesses Valkyrie engineers had missed for centuries. Across the city in a private healing chamber, the sovereign matriarch contemplated similar data. Beside her recovery pod stood Zalthar, the ancient scientist whose warnings had been ignored. You were correct, she admitted, her voice weaker than usual. We have gravely misunderstood these beings. Zalthir's nearly transparent form seemed to absorb and refract the room's light. The failing monument was not an accident, he revealed quietly. Our consensus intelligence detected subtle sabotage patterns, likely from the Nair Collective, but identified them too late to prevent the attack. The matriarch's faceted eyes widened. You kept this from the council. The information was too sensitive while we assessed the humans. Now it places us in a complicated position. Zalthir gestured, bringing up comparison data between Valkyrie and human neural patterns. Our evolutionary path optimized for efficiency and stable environments, while humans evolved for adaptation to chaos and crisis. The implications were profound. The Valkyrie's perfect crystalline neural pathways processed information with unmatched efficiency. When parameters remained stable, human, inefficient neural networks, with their seemingly chaotic connections, created mental flexibility that allowed for instant adaptation to changing conditions. Our society functions on absolute certainty of our evolutionary superiority, the matriarch observed. This belief has maintained peace for millennia. A peace now threatened by truth, Zalthir replied. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Maya Chen analyzed the medical data transmitted by her sister's implants. The Valkyrie physiology was becoming clearer. Their crystalline structures allowed perfect energy transmission and thought patterns of remarkable clarity, but lacked the neural plasticity of human brains. They're like perfect quantum computers, she explained to the emergency session of the UN Security Council, while we're messy parallel processors. They excel at solving known problems with vast computational power. We excel at novel problems through adaptation. The siblings realized simultaneously what this meant. The Valkyrie could not innovate rapidly because their neural pathways were too structured. Their technology, while advanced, had likely remained fundamentally unchanged for millennia. On Valkyrie's Prime, public opinion shifted dramatically when security footage leaked showing humans identifying structural weaknesses in the monument within minutes of arrival. Young Valkyrie, always more adaptable than elders, began mimicking human behaviors in an effort to develop similar capabilities. The first true interspecies friendship formed between Dr. Layla Patel and a young Valkyrie engineer named Thelios, the same administrator who had dismissed her concerns before the disaster. Now he approached her in the recovery center with an unprecedented request. Teach me to think like a human. The question reflected the emerging fracture in Valkyrie society between traditionalists who insisted on maintaining hierarchical superiority and a growing movement that recognized adaptation might be as valuable as perfection. As Thelios and Paddle began working together to redesign evacuation protocols, neither realized they were creating something unprecedented in galactic history. A true exchange of complementary cognitive approaches where crystalline precision met human improvisation. The Valkyrie's assessment of humanity had fundamentally changed, but Sub-Chancellor Mesrel, watching this dangerous friendship develop, was already planning her countermove. If she couldn't maintain hierarchy through tradition, perhaps another approach would restore proper order. Red alert sirens shattered the tense political standoff on Valkyrie's Prime. The crystalline towers of the capital vibrated with warning tones as emergency broadcasts interrupted all communication networks. Orbital defense sensors had detected multiple warships decelerating at the system's edge, massive vessels of unfamiliar configuration. In the human delegation's quarters, Commander Chen's neural implant pinged with urgent data from Earth. Unidentified vessels detected approaching Valkyrie space. The message read, "Configuration matches partial scans of ships observed near Jupiter's moons 3 centuries ago. Classified historical designation, Tunguska contact." Before she could process this information, a Valkyrie security detail arrived to escort the delegation to the emergency command center, an unprecedented breach of protocol that spoke to the severity of the situation. The command center buzzed with frantic activity as Valkyrie operators manipulated holographic displays showing the approaching fleet. The sovereign matriarch and high council members stood on a central platform, their crystalline forms pulsing with alarm patterns. Nair warships, Zalthar identified, his ancient voice cutting through the chaos. The first major incursion in centuries. The Valkyrie defense fleet scrambled to intercept, but their response appeared sluggish and disorganized. Tactical officers struggled to coordinate their perfectly designed, but rarely tested defense systems. Your presence was requested. The matriarch addressed the human delegation directly, because these ships made a course correction toward your home system before altering trajectory to approach us. They appear to have knowledge of both our worlds. Sub-Chancellor Mesril stepped forward, her form vibrating with intensity. I invited them, she announced, sending shockwaves through the command center. A controlled incursion to remind our people of the threats beyond our borders, to restore proper order. Her confession froze the room in shock until a harsh, guttural laugh emanated from the main communication screen. A massive being appeared, chitinous exoskeleton covered in bony protrusions, 4 powerful arms, and compound eyes that glittered with cold intelligence. Fool, the Nher commander growled through the translation system. You think you control us? We've waited centuries for this opportunity. The sovereign matriarch stood before the reconstructed Grand Convocation Chamber, her many-faceted eyes surveying the assembled representatives from 3 species, Valkyrie crystalline forms arranged in perfect geometric patterns, humans scattered in seemingly random distribution, and a small contingent of Nher observers standing uncomfortably at the periphery. 1 month had passed since the Nher incursion and subsequent ceasefire. For 12,000 cycles, she began, her voice amplified through the chamber's perfect acoustics. We built our civilization on the certainty of our evolutionary perfection. Today we acknowledge this was not wisdom, but arrogance. The silence that followed held the weight of a civilization confronting its fundamental misconception of the universe. The Valkyrie had always classified species hierarchically, with themselves at the apex of evolution. Now that certainty lay shattered. The Nher commander's revelation that his species had feared humans for centuries had been confirmed by ancient records Zalthar discovered in forbidden archives. Valkyrie explorers had indeed visited Earth during prehistoric times, observing early hominids whose persistent hunting techniques and collaborative problem-solving marked them as potential threats. Rather than document these findings honestly, the explorers had classified Earth as uninhabitable by civilized standards and erased its coordinates from common star charts. The universe we thought we understood has proven far more complex, the matriarch continued. Evolution follows many paths. Efficiency is but one measure of advancement. Adaptation may prove equally valuable. The reshaping of Valkyrie society unfolded rapidly yet painfully. Sub-Chancellor Mesril and her hardline traditionalists retreated to isolated colonies, refusing to accept the new reality. The rigid caste system that had defined Valkyrie culture for millennia began dissolving as humans introduced concepts previously unthinkable. Meritocracy, innovation through controlled chaos, celebration of individual differences. Zalthar, now elevated to High Chancellor, worked alongside Commander Chen to establish the first truly equal interspecies alliance in known galactic history. The Valkyrie perfected stability, he explained at the signing ceremony. Humans mastered adaptation. Together, we create something greater than either alone. The Human Valkyrie Concordat established exchange programs, joint defense initiatives, and shared governance of border regions. Even the Nher, after tense negotiations, established limited diplomatic relations with both species. The greatest challenge came from within both societies. Conservative human factions feared alien influence. Traditional Valkyrie mourned their lost sense of superiority. Commander Chen and Ambassador Mendez faced assassination attempts from human supremacist groups. Zalthar survived 3 challenges to his leadership. Yet each crisis strengthened the alliance, proving its necessity. In a pivotal moment during anti-alien riots on Earth, Thelios and a contingent of young Valkyrie engineers volunteered to assist with disaster relief after an earthquake in Mexico. Working alongside human emergency services, they demonstrated how Valkyrie precision combined with human improvisation, saved lives that either species working alone would have lost. 6 months after the Nehera incursion, they returned in force, expecting to find divided enemies. Instead, they encountered the first human-Valkyrie combined fleet, Valkyrie engineering perfection, enhanced by human tactical flexibility. What could have been a devastating war ended with minimal casualties, as the Alliance demonstrated overwhelming capability through coordinated action rather than brute force. In the aftermath, the Sovereign Matriarch made her final public appearance before entering the traditional end-of-life seclusion. She summoned Dr. Layla Patul, the anthropologist who had carried Valkyrie children through fire, and Philios, now leader of the Thriving Human Approach Collective. "My species spent millennia perfecting our achievements," she told them, her form grown thin with age. "We forgot that perfection is not an end state, but a journey. The greatest strength is not in flawless execution of the known, but in facing the unknown without fear." 1 year after first contact, the skyline of the Valkyrie capital reflected the new reality. Ancient crystal spires still reached toward the stars, but now they incorporated human-designed reinforcement structures. Less elegant perhaps, but far more resilient. The newly established Adaptation Academy welcomed its first class of students from both worlds, housed in a building that combined Valkyrie crystalline precision with human adaptive architecture. In its central courtyard stood a simple monument, a human hand and Valkyrie hand reaching toward each other, fashioned from materials from both homeworlds.